Hello again, once again from Kilgore, Texas. This is Dr. Jill Powers, and I'm sorry about what happened to our last video. I had a little accident with the mouse there, and it got bumped, and this caused it to be knocked off recording. So, and I thought, well, maybe I should just toss that. And I thought, no, I'll go ahead and keep it. I'll just go ahead and pick up where left off last time reading, and I was talking about the relationship between Candyman and Helen as being a throwback story to Eloise and Abelard, and very interesting romance there, this May-December type of relationship. And before you get too critical of these, of Abelard being a pedophile or something, just remember this was the high point of the Middle Ages, and he was a famous teacher, and that kind of thing was not looked down on. And she was 18, which is definitely of marriage age back then. So. Just remember, the wife of Bath got married at the age of 12, and she was married 5 times. So, yes, they did things like that even back then, believe it or not. So let me pick up where I left off. I had talked a little bit about the castration of Peter Abelard as being the equivalent of Candyman's artist's hand being sawed off, and he was subsequently lynched and killed. So he becomes a murderous ghost. Abelard did not die. Okay, he did not die, but he was. They were forced to retreat into their respective cloisters. Abelard was able to effectively sublimate his passions into literary form, but Candyman, bereft of his artist's hand and given a hook by the mob who killed him with bees, sublimates his passion into vengeance, writing his legacy in the palette of blood and flesh of Cabrini green, scrawled on the urban landscape as sweets to the sweet. Candyman's bitterness, oddly enough, sweets to the sweet, he's very bitter, swarms within the symbolism of the angry biting bees infesting the crust of his dead body. Tony Todd, the Shakespearean actor who played Candyman in the original, like I said, he is a Shakespearean actor, a good thing, because this is a very Shakespearean thing. Quote, "There's a certain saint-like quality about him, since it was rare for a black person to become an artist. But the same society that made Candyman ends up rebuking him when he falls in love with a white woman. So Candyman's not supposed to be a little pissed off. He suffered a wrongful death just at the point of becoming a dominant creative force, and now he's going to make a different contribution to society." End quote. And that's according to Mr. Schweiger, Hooked on Terror. Furthermore, Helen's bargaining with Candyman over Anne-Marie's child is a reincarnation of the girl's Elizabeth love affair with Candyman that led to his murder. Astrolabe, the child of Abelard and Eloise, is the inspiration for the child. Helen is Eloise, and Candyman is Abelard in the film's plot. As Barker himself says, this is a woman, quote, "This is a woman who isn't getting enough love at home and has invented a lover of her own and called in the Candyman. This idea of forbidden love, finding some manifestation that is both monstrous and romantic, is something which comes up obviously in Dracula. I think what Bernard Rose did was really sort of change the rules, invert the rules." By the way, Hollywood, why don't you try doing that? Why don't you try going to the ancients for a change and looking at some ancient stories and kind of, rewriting them within another form. That's what Shakespeare and all the best writers did. So, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt that. Just had to throw that in there because Hollywood has been really Holly-weird lately. Invert the rules. Allowed him to play a kind of mock romance that was at one moment horrendous and the next moment romantic. The stories exchanged between lovers and whispers are, quote, an excuse to cling closer together. And that is the sublimation for Candyman. Sorry about that. Little dog. The point of the sublimation of life through death is what Sigmund Freud would refer to as a hysterical death wish. To let go, well, quote, to let go, to give up all ambition to life and leave her body to the dark, end quote. Discussing this with other people this weekend, I want to tell you, isn't that kind of the sex problem for women is that there's pleasure through pain, first through the act itself, which once you break through it, it's okay, but then having to possibly suffer a life-threatening situation, having children, okay? It's pleasure through pain. It is. You do get something out of it. You get your children from that, and you nurture them through that. But pleasure through pain of coitus, like Tristan and Isolde, like Paolo and Francesca of Dante's Inferno, but all of them are punished. They're all punished for this kind of really more excessive love. This is not a business deal, as was usual back then with the state of marriage, where money was involved and transacted, where the female became virtually the property of the man that she was marrying, and so you can see why girls got married off very quickly, because you didn't want them to lose their virginity, right? Okay, and if they did, well, they were going to end up as nuns or worse. Okay, so leave her body to the dark, to allow this kind of honeyed psychopath, whose dark secret sign had been nurtured and protected by oral tradition, to give her his bittersweet dark core of being. Quote, life without living, to be dead, but to be remembered everywhere, immortal in gossip and graffiti, end quote. That's from Clive Barker's The Forbidden. You really get a better sense of what the story is based upon from reading the short story, and these are from his third book of Blood, Books of Blood. I'm sure you've heard of Clive Barker's other works, that his movies that were very popular during the 90s, and that kind of stopped, and that's too bad, because he's a great writer, very very much a homosexual, but there you go. I mean, he wrote some very compelling stories here, and this is one of them. So, the Hook and Candyman himself are signs for this prevailing urban legend. Urban legends then take stage as meta-semiotic signposts within both the film and the short story. Inherent within this structure is the same psychological hook as women have for rape fantasies. Being seduced by the Byronic dark hero, a fear of childbirth and death, signified by the letting of blood, set up within the morals of the Hook and the mutilated boy, these two urban legends. Dr. Purcell, one of the characters, um, one of Trevor's, Helen's husband's colleagues, um, and who kind of goads Helen about picking up. He says he had done this subject, but he warns her. You don't want to go too far with this, okay? Because it's some serious business. Dr. Purcell, who is a colleague of Helen's husband Trevor, relates the first urban legend of the Hook, tale about the lovers and the escaped lunatic, where, quote, the lover is disemboweled, usually by a hook-handed man, and the body left on the top of the car while the fiancé cowers inside, according to Barker. Purcell states that, quote, it's a cautionary tale warning of the evils of rampant heterosexuality. However, Purcell also warns that in such tales is, quote, conspicuous absence of witnesses. They are always related as something that happened to a friend of a friend of a friend, etc., as Purcell describes them, quote, titillation for bored housewives, end quote. Part of their appeal may be in their taboo nature, but it's more than that. Death needs to be nearby, since, quote, television's not intimate enough, end quote. That's typical Barker, morbid, tongue-in-cheek stuff. Helen wants the true intimacy of complete knowledge of her lover. Beyond the superficial world of academia she had been moving toward. Boy, don't I know about that superficial level. Yeah. But it's more than that. Beyond the superficial world of academia she had been moving toward, beyond the facile trappings of an average bourgeois existence ever struggling to achieve the 322 house with its astronomical life sentence of a mortgage. The life sentence of overindulged children who would incessantly suck her dry of her life's blood. She is also held back by her insipid college professor husband, shown in the film as a philandering rat who steals her ideas for his classes, then screws his own students. Yeah, do you want to know what I think about professors who do that kind of thing? And some of you may have called me unprofessional compared to that, compared to what's been going on in our colleges and universities. Anything that I did was microscopic by comparison to that. Knocking up a student, that's something else. Okay. Just my opinion. But it's my professional opinion, and yes, I'm much more professional than they are in that regard. I would never compromise a student's education by doing that kind of thing. Okay. Where was it? He screws his own students, whose vampirism is draining her of any desire to perpetuate their union. Helen wants that dark secret love that is all-consuming, an annihilation as the star-crossed lovers fuse, not loving in a traditional sense, but as D.H. Lawrence describes in Women in Love, a star equilibrium, where both lovers are gone out of themselves but balanced against each other in separate orbits. However, in physics, when neutron stars collide, their explosion is the metaphor for the completely satisfying climax, resulting in a black hole, a totally nihilistic state of being. Within Freudian terms, the normally opposing terms of the libido and the death drive here have in this scenario become confused. When the ego seeks pleasure, it is supposed to be a life perpetuating instinct. When the ego seeks its own destruction in its own way, sometimes becomes conflated and confused as thanatos, or the death drive, as termed by Sigmund Freud and Beyond the Pleasure Principle, states, quote, according to Mr. Faulkner, in opposition to the pleasure principle, the death drive, the residual of a pre-organic chaotic past, attempts to undo the organic whole. Indeed, it finds its specific pleasure precisely in what is most painful and disturbing to the organism. Yet while Freud designates the death drive as the body's primitive, most inhuman element, there are also intriguing connections between this most archaic and automatic impulse and that which we understand to be the most cultured, creative, and human: conscience, art, religion, or what Freud nominated as the sublimated drive, and the superego. When he calls the highest human achievements and presumably considers furthest from brute instinct are also in part products of a primeval genetic legacy. According to Freud, in this manner, the lowest, the most acephalous drive intersects with the highest, most creative and intelligent in the region beyond the pleasure principle. We're going to get a little crash course in Psychoanalytic Theory 101 from Dr. Powers. Okay. And yes, I did teach a class of literary criticism. I'll just interrupt. A little side note. I have a few PhDs and a lot of MAs and a few JDs under my academic belt as far as students who went on to achieve. Particularly one in my literary criticism class who wasn't even an English major, who later changed to English in graduate school and went on to get his PhD at Dartmouth. Ernest, I'm very proud of you. Way to go. Especially since you based it on the paper that you did in my class. Okay, so where was I? Indeed, Helen has no reason to live. After she has discovered her husband's unfaithfulness, discovered that the urban legend surrounding Candyman is all too real, not just a story, and that Candyman himself is her destined lover. Quote, Freud posits the death drive as a makeshift yet alluring appendix to the understanding of the psychic economy. The death drive is opposed to the life drive, libido or eros, which builds life into greater and greater bodies, and so increases the opportunity for each smaller body or cell to survive. Conversely, the death drive tends toward bodily disintegration and in due course will return the organism back to an ultimate equilibrium. Beyond that sought by the pleasure principle in death. Interesting how D.H. Lawrence arrived at his conclusion in Women in Love concerning the star equilibrium is very much in tune with this. So, whatever you want to think about D.H. Lawrence as a person, yeah, maybe he was not the nicest person in the world, but he knew what he was talking about. Okay. Beyond that sought by the principle, the pleasure principle in death. Thus, while libido attaches to objects, we were talking about the gaze, the phallic gaze, seizing on to the other as object of affection or maybe just simply voyeurism. Okay, it is a form of voyeurism, sure. And is there anything wrong with that? No, not as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. You're fine. That's the great thing about female bodies in the movies. That's what they're there for. They're there for the sex appeal, literally. But we mustn't forget that animation aren't women. Okay? I would ask you guys, if you're taking an asshole level point of view, looking up a woman's ass, I can't think of anything more unsexy. I wouldn't want to be looking up yours, okay? That's the last thing I want to see. Oh boy. Well, anyway, hair keeps flying into my mouth. I don't know why I put my hair back. Maybe a sign I need to get my hair cut, huh? Okay. Thus, while libido attaches to objects, creating ties of affection or energy cathexes. I would prefer them as energy cathexes because, especially in movies where you have the fourth wall. Okay, you get no other interaction. It's safe. Phallic gazing is safe, isn't it? It's not going to cost you child support and all the other problems that come with trying to have real relationships with real people. You don't have to do that. You don't have to invest the time, the money, your soul, anything. So it's a safe position. Causes a buildup of tension that will lead to a great psychic distress if it is not harnessed and redirected by the ego from which libido issues. Despite the warnings of the resident at Cabrini Green, Helen willingly calls Candyman the required 5 times for him to appear. So she had been warned and warned and warned and warned and warned and warned and warned, and still went on and called him anyway, which says to me, that's a desperate act. It's a desperate act, and she doesn't know what to do. Her life is in tatters, so, just waiting for the abattoir, as it were. I know how that is. Despite the warnings of the residents of Cabrini Green, Helen willingly calls Candyman the required 5 times for him to appear. Despite what Helen learns from Purcell about Candyman's background, she persists and redoubles her efforts to find Candyman, despite her protestations at first when Candyman first haunts Helen, despite her subsequent incarceration as the main suspect in Anthony's disappearance in the film. Helen keeps going back to Cabrini Green for answers. Answers to what? What are you going to find? You could write your thesis right there. You could have left before anything else happened. But you didn't. Did you, Helen? Okay. That's a death drive. She continues going back to Cabrini Green, ever going so far to save the photographs of the Hellmouth painting onto slides where she sees Candyman's image captured in the camera lens's reflection, although blurry. Most people would have passed over it as mere white noise on the film, but not Helen. She refocuses the slide and finds that he has been with her all along in the investigation. However, then again, she did call him, an act of repetition, so that the audience can see that there is no mistake. She wanted Candyman's special variety of love, even while she jokes about it with Bernadette, her partner in the sociology thesis project, who dies a very grisly death by Candyman too, by the way, in her own apartment. So it's she put her own best friend in that danger, and that was a consequence of it. Her subconscious seems to have wanted Candyman's embrace. Quote, the death drive is the most unconscious or concealed element of the unconscious. It resides beyond the pleasure principle, which it attracted Freud precisely because it adheres to observable phenomena, i.e. to a physics of the human mind. The death drive, on the other hand, is obscure because it is more primordial than libido. In fact, eros emerges from Thanatos as its outward manifestation. Freud thus resorts to a mode of metaphysical speculation to illuminate the death drive. At its loftiest, Thanatos expresses the body's place in the greater scheme of things as what is mortal and must return to nothingness. Freud's contention, considered peculiar by his contemporaries, and indeed many Freudians even today, was that an element internal to the organism itself takes death as its end, and life is only a means to that end, according to Mr. Faulkner. In Helen's case, the death drive and the pleasure principle overlap, what Germans refer to as the Liebestod of Richard Wagner's operatic saga, Tristan and Isolde, love as death. Which is often linked to the concept of Leibniz. God. Oh man, my German is rusty, isn't it? Yeah. Leibniz. Love is redemption. Okay, I know I'm going to get dinged on that. Not unlike Christ's passion. Within Nietzsche's conception of ideal nihilism, the Schopenhauerian ideal is that salvation and negation become interchangeable. In the Wagnerian ideal of the Liebestod, this concept is taken a step further. Quote, in Schopenhauer's aesthetic outlook, sexual love affirms the principle of individuation and therefore life. For Wagner, love embraces sexual love, and it is in this respect perhaps that his Tristan diverges most sharply from Schopenhauer. In a letter he apparently never sent, Wagner explained to Schopenhauer that sex could constitute a means of access rather than a barrier to the noumenal. Sex was a way for the overcoming of individuation rather than its reassertion. Liebestod expresses Wagner's idiosyncratic notion of the conjunction of death, Tod, and sexual love, Liebe, according to Kilborn. Okay, so why don't we just stop right there? We've got about the same amount of time I had last time, and like I said, I'm going to break these sessions in two because this is an awfully long paper that I wrote here, and give you a little bit of a break, and you can go look at this for yourself. Once again, I put a link under the description of where you can find this paper to read it in its entirety without my commentary, but you can look all this up as far as the overlapping of the of Eros and the death drive. Okay, and that'll be all for today, and I will see you later. Bye.